So we have a handout for this session if you want to follow along, or if you want to take a look at it and refer to it later. Either ways, it's up to you. We also have two data sets we're going to be working with. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with this expanded Superstore data set, and then we have a data set called classroom scheduled data. We're going to use this one to talk about how to combine different data sets. But for now, we're going to use this expanded Superstore data. And I'm going to connect to my data set here. So again, this is Tableau Public I'm working with. Um, if you're using the full version of Tableau, it should still look a lot like this. This is the opening screen you see when you open up Tableau. You're going to want to, the first thing you need to do is connect to a file. So the expanded Superstore data set is an Excel file. So I'm going to click on Excel, and that is in my downloads folder. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it from an imaginary furniture store. So this is what we're going to work with today. So we connected to this furniture Superstore data set, and this data set is already ready to go. It works pretty well with Tableau. We've been using this data set for a while. But I just wanted to remind you that if you're doing this in real life with a data set that you found or created, what you're going to want to do is look at the data columns in this data source view in Tableau and make sure Tableau has correctly identified each of your data types. So each column, on the top of each column, you'll see this little icon. So this is indicating what kind of data we're working with. So we see the ABC icon on string data. The little globe icon is for geographic data. And we see a pound sign if it's numerical data, and we might see calendar or date and time data. And if so, we'll see the little calendar icon. But again, this data set's ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and start creating our first sheet. So I'm going to click sheet 1 to get started here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at a combination chart. So last week, Rachel showed us how to build bar charts and line graphs. And with this first example today, we're going to talk about how to show both of those things on one sheet. So Tableau calls these combination charts. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at the order date pill. So we're going to look at sales and profit by month. So I'm going to take the order date pill, not the order ID, the order date, the one with the little calendar icon. And if you recall from last week or last month, you can just drag and drop these pills into your workspace. So I'm going to take the order date and I'm going to drop it into the columns shelf. And so this is a date data type. So we can, so the default is year, but we can open up that pill just by clicking on that little down arrow or right clicking on the pill. And we'll see the date options. So you'll see two sets of date options in this pill. We'll see the first option, it says year, quarter, month, day, and more. So you can get down to week number or weekday. I'm going to choose month here. So that shows us sort of like the calendar, January through December. And just to remind you, if we clicked on the second month option in this set of date options, the second month shows you more of a timeline. So it starts in December 2015 and goes all the way to December 2018. So this is more linear, the second section. And the first cluster of date options are aggregate. So we're looking at all the aggregated data by month here. So that's the date option I want to choose for this example. So I want to show sales and profit by month. So sales and profit are both measures down here. So again, under anything under this line here, the pills with the green icons are measures. So these are the kinds of variables you may want to perform some kind of mathematical function on. So let's take sales first. So I'll take the sales pill and I'm going to put that into rows. And now we can see sales by month on this chart. And but it's a combo chart, so I want a second variable to show up on this, a second numerical variable. So I'm going to take the profit pill. I'm going to take it and I'm going to drop the profit pill just to the right of the sales pill. I'm going to drop that in, and that shows me two different charts on one page. And that might be helpful in some cases, but for this example, we don't want that necessarily. We want to show these two lines on the same axis. So if you have two measures in your rows shelf, what you can do is if you open up the pill farthest to the right, so in this case it's the profit pill. Again, you can just click on that little arrow. You see an option here to create a dual axis chart. So I'm going to do that. If you happen to put profit in front of sales, then you would just find that dual axis under profit. So whatever pill is for the right is the one you want. So in my case, it's summer profit. So we have this dual axis, and now we see where this graph is showing both sales and profit on the same axis. And if we look over at the right for measure names, it color coded our graph as well. And we sort of know intuitively that these lines shouldn't be the same, right? So sales and profit should be uh, different lines. But if we look closely, um, we will see that the reason that they appear to be very similar is the axes are not synchronized. So if we look on the right, we see the profit axis, and it only goes up to 36,000. If we look on the right for the sales axis, it goes up to 28,000. So this might be a little bit misleading if we were just to share this graph with somebody. So we don't want to mislead any of um, our audience. So what we can do to make this a little bit more clear is we can synchronize the axis. So if I take my mouse and I go into the either axis, either the left or the right, and I right click, I see the option to synchronize the axis. So now I see both profit and sales, that both axes are on the same scale now. So that's a little bit, it paints a more accurate picture of what's actually going on here. And when we created that dual axis chart, you may have noticed that we all of a sudden have new marks cards. So we have this all section in the marks here, but so if we wanted to make a change to everything, maybe we want to change the size of those lines, we can do that. And then it applies to both the sales and the profit data. But we also see here there are marks that just apply to the sales or just apply to the profit. So if we wanted to change some of this around, we could. So let's say, for example, we want to change this line chart, the sales line, to a bar. So I have the sales marks card activated here, and where it says automatic in the previous session, we talked a lot about this Show Me tab over on the right. Um, this is where you can select the visualization type, but I'm going to show you another way to do it. So from the marks card, there's this drop down menu. It says automatic, and there's like a tiny little line there. If we open up that drop down menu, we can specify what we want to see. So if I want to change the sales to a bar, I could do that. So now I have the sales bar and the profit line. Maybe I want to increase the size of that profit line just so you can see it a little bit easier. So I'm going to click on the profit uh, option in the marks card. I'm just going to move that, and then I'm going to click on size and move that slider a little bit over to the right. So again, I just clicked on size. So you can change the thickness of that line. It's just a little bit easier to see. All right, so that's a basic line chart, or I'm sorry, combo chart. So we have a line and um, a bar on the same thing. And you can pretty much do a combination chart with a variety of different visualization types. It doesn't have to be a line and a graph necessarily. You can also reorder. I mentioned that it does kind of matter how your uh, sales and profit pills are arranged here. So if I were to move the profit pill in front, now you can see the um, the sales line is in back, so it's harder to see. So if that's what you're looking at, you can just move your pills around in the shelf here. And another thing I would like to do is change this view from the standard view to the entire view. It just spreads out my visualization over the entire view, and it's just easier to see. I think some of the uh, month labels were kind of squished and truncated, and now we can read everything. If we wanted to, we could add maybe a filter to this. So maybe we want to look at, um, maybe we want to be able to filter by region or something like that. So if maybe I'm going to take this region pill and put that on the filters. And now I see we have this filter dialog box. I want to select all, and my filter is not going to show up unless I tell it to. So after I created that filter, I'm going to click on that regions tab and show filter. And now we can see how those numbers change based on the regional filter. All right, so that's a basic combination chart. I'm going to name this, maybe I'll just name it combo chart. So I titled the chart up here, but it still says sheet one down below, so I'm going to rename it down there as well. These don't have to be the same, but they can be. All right, so that's a basic combination chart. I'm going to create another sheet here. And with this next example, I want to take a look at scatter plots. So scatter plot is when you're comparing two numerical variables along the x and y axis. So you can sort of think of this as kind of like an xy axis with the columns as the x and the rows as the y. So the two numerical values I want to compare here are going to be sales and profit. So I'm going to take the sales and I'm going to drop that into columns. I'm going to take the profit and I'm going to put that into rows. And we see this sort of like an XY axis Tableau created for us. And we see this one little dot up in the top right. If we click the Show Me tab, we can see Tableau correctly assume that we wanted to create a scatter plot. So that's a good start. But we just have 1 point on our scatter plot, so it's not very interesting. It's not really telling us much. So we need to add some more data to this. So let's say, for example, that I want my scatter plot to show me product categories, I guess you would call it. So I can take the category pill up here and drop that onto color. And now I see, instead of having one dot, I have three dots on my scatter plot, each showing me the relationship between sales and profit by category. Now let's say I want to add another element of detail here. Let's say I want to add region. So I want to look at how uh, or what this relationship between sales and profit looks by region. So I'm going to take my region pill and I'm just going to drop that onto detail to see what that does. Okay, so what that did is that showed us a dot. So we're still showing the color coding by category, but we have a dot for each category or each region for each category. So if we hover over if we look at the tooltip, so if we look at these blue dots, we have furniture in the south, furniture in the central, furniture in the east, and furniture in the west region. It looks like furniture sales in the central region aren't doing so good. They're in the red here, so that's not really what we want. Um, but maybe what we want to do is look at trends. Maybe we want to look at any trends that are going on in our scatter plot. So what you can just sort of eyeball it if you want to, but it's kind of easier to see trends if you draw a line. So you can draw a trend line with Tableau. So Tableau is great at visualizing data. It's probably not your best option for analytics, but it does do a few analytical things for you. So if you click on the Analytics tab up here, so the default is Data, so you're looking at the Data tab. But if you click on Analytics, it will show you a few different analytics you can apply to your uh, chart or graph. So in this example, I want to look at a trend line. So when I hover my mouse over the trend line, it looks kind of like a gray pill now. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to treat it just like a pill. I'm just going to drag it to the main part of my screen. And I can see here it's giving me the option of what kind of trend line I want to add here. So in this case, I want it to be a linear trend line because this is a linear relationship between these two variables. And now I can see the slope of the curve is the slope of the line is telling us the relationship. So this is if we hover over this office supplies line, it actually is showing us the calculation, and it's the steepest line. So it looks like office supplies. We're getting our greatest return on investment here in office supplies. Um, as we sell more, our profits tend to go way up. So the slope isn't, as we may have guessed just by looking at the blue dots here, the furniture is not as profitable. But this is great if you want to easily pick trends out in your scatter plot. Those trend lines can be really helpful. Another thing you can do here, you could change the symbol if you wanted to. So if we go in the marks card, there's the shape option. Maybe I want them to be filled in circles. I could do that, or maybe diamonds. If you click on more shapes, you'll see some more here. You can also, if you wanted to, you could add your own uh, shapes to Tableau, but that's sort of beyond the scope of this class. But it is an option if you wanted to add more symbols here. But I put the stars in for now. I'm not sure you want to do that in real life, but it looks nice for this example. I'm going to name this chart scatter plot. Maybe what I'm going to do before I move on, I'm going to put the shape back to a circle. And I do want to change my color scheme a little bit because it's too similar to my profit and sales. So I want to be able to differentiate these when I put them in it's something I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but when we put the dashboard together, when we combine more than one chart, we have to be cognizant of our color scheme. Uh, you might think that is orange and blue refer to the same orange and blue on this chart. So let's go ahead and change our color scheme. So maybe I want to use the colorblind palette here, and I'm going to assign that palette. But maybe I don't want the blue and orange because it's too similar to the other. Maybe I'll take this peach color, put that on furniture. Maybe I can take what's something like that. I don't know. You can change the palette to be whatever you want. I just changed it here to make it a little different from our other color scheme and to make it a little bit more easily viewable by our colorblind friends. All right, so now that I have this scatter plot, I changed the color. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new sheet. So with this next example, we're going to take a look at histograms. Histograms are specialized bar charts that show distributions. So we're going to look at how to build one in Tableau here. So for this example, we're going to look at the number of items per sale. So to build this, we're going to take the quantity fill and we're going to drag that into columns. And now from the Show Me tab, we're going to open that up and we're going to click on histogram. And now that we've selected the histogram, you see Tableau has done a few things for us. It put uh, it turned the default aggregation from quantity. It's now a quantity bin. And now with the rows, we're looking at the count quantity. So that's what we're looking at here is the number of sales. So on the x-axis, these are the sales or the items per sale, and the total number of sales is on the y-axis. Okay, so the couple things I would like to do to make this a little bit more easy to interpret. So if we take a close look at our bin sizes, we see that this first chunk goes from 0 to about 1.8, and the next one goes from about 1.8 to about 3.7 or something like that. So when we're counting items per sale, it doesn't make much sense to have 1.8 items in a sale. So we want to change the bin the size of the bin. So instead of it looks like it's 1.83, so we want to change that to 1. So now each bin here is showing us the number of items per sale, right? So this first bin is showing us that there were 731 sales that were just had one item in it. The bin 2 shows us that there were 1,936 sales that had 2 items in it, and so forth. So that's um, what we just created, and that's what we just modified by changing the bin. So if we're thinking about like an even distribution, it's normally like a bell curve kind of a thing. In this example, everything's kind of skewed to the right. So more sales have 3 or less items in them. There are a few sales that had um, 14 items in them. Okay, but there are some things I want to do to this histogram to make it a little bit more interesting. Maybe highlight a few more um, sales categories or something like that. Okay, so maybe we want to color code these by category. So I can take the category pill and I'm going to drop that into color. So now we see when I hover my mouse over the different color, it's showing us that the office supply, out of all the orders that had 2 items in them, 1,173 of them were office supplies. So that's what the category is showing us. Now let's say we also want to label those. So we can see the relative size, but maybe we want to put a label so we can actually see the number. So instead of hovering over the bin with my mouse, I just want that to be labeled. So that's the quantity that I want labeled. So I'm going to take the quantity pill and drop that onto the label card in my marks card. So this is showing me the number. Okay, so we talked a little bit last week about calculated fields. So let's say instead of showing the number, I want to see the percentage. So if I open up that quantity pill, I can add a quick table calculation. I'm going to add percent of total. So each percent now is showing us the total percent. So out of all of the sales, 7.74% of them were office supplies with 2 items in them. But maybe I'm interested in just the percentage within each bin. So I can edit that table calculation. Rachel talked a little bit about this last week, but if we go to the edit table calculation, it brings up this dialog box. And instead of table across, which was the default, we can go to cell. We're seeing the percentage that that category is responsible for. So I'm going to rename this So histograms can be a little tricky to figure out like what's the optimal bin size. In this case, since we're looking at number of items per sale, I thought it would make sense to just make it a like an even whole number. Um, but in some situations, if you're looking at like age ranges or something like that, maybe you want to group it up into 5-year increments or something like that. Um, it just sort of depends on you're what kind of data you're working with and what kind of story you're trying to tell. But in this case, it just made sense to make each bin size one. But again, you could change that just by right clicking on the quantity bin here. So this, I didn't explicitly point this out, but we looked at it earlier. This is something that Tableau automatically creates when you um, change the visualization type to the histogram. It adds this new pill for the bin. All right, so with the calculated field, let's say I wanted to show how much what my company's expenses were over time, right? So maybe I want to take the order date and I'm going to grab expenses from my measures. Oh, but there are no expenses. Okay, so this data set seems to be a little bit incomplete. We don't have expenses. So the good thing is that it's an easy number to calculate. So if you've ever like taken intro to accounting or economics or something like that, you know that profit is sales minus expenses. You do some simple algebra there, and you turn that around. So expenses would be sales minus profit. So we have all the numbers to make that calculation here, but we don't have a way to visualize it until we create the calculated field. So I am going to show you how to do that now. So you can right click anywhere on the data panel, but not on one of the pills. So somewhere below, you can just right click and create a calculated field. So this one is going to be expenses. And I know that expenses is going to be sales minus profit. So one way I can create this formula, by the way, it's very similar to like an Excel formula. So if you've done Excel formulas, this might seem familiar to you. One of the nice things about Tableau, though, is you can just drag and drop your fields into this equation. So I'm going to take the sales and I'm going to type in the minus sign here. So sales minus, and it says here, this calculation contains errors. In this case, we just haven't completed the expression. It says we're missing an identifier. So maybe I want to call this expenses over time or something. I do want to connect now to that scheduling, that classroom scheduling data set. So the nice thing about Tableau is you don't necessarily need to open a new project to connect to another data set. So we're going to go and connect to that other data set, even though it really has nothing to do with the furniture store data. We can connect to it from the same project. From here, all I need to do is assuming I've downloaded the new data set and I have, click on data from the top menu and then new data set. And this is another Excel file. So I'm going to click on Microsoft Excel. I have it on my desktop. So this is it. I'm going to open up this classroom schedule data set. And if you open it up already, you may have noticed that nothing happens. In the previous examples, whenever we connected to a new data set, we saw tables and rows and columns with the little data type icons up on top, but nothing's happening here. Um, don't worry, nothing is broken. What happened is that this new sheet this new file we're trying to connect to has 3 sheets in it. One called capacity, one called new rooms, and one called sessions. So this example is based on something one of our colleagues created for a history class. Um, but we modified it a little bit to make it work with this session. But I'm going to click on capacity just for a moment. You don't have to do this. I just wanted to show you something. So if I move capacity to the main part of the screen, it's just a small little data set which has two variables, classroom ID and seats, so the number of seats per classroom. I'm going to hit the back button, and I want to take a look at what this sessions data set looks like. Okay, so it has a session ID, it has a classroom, a schedule, an enrollment. Okay, so what you may have noticed is that the capacity set has a classroom ID and sessions as a classroom, and they're both alphabetical, so A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to combine these two data sets. There, uh, there's the third one we'll talk about in a few minutes, but for now, we're going to talk about how to combine the capacity and the sessions data set. So if you recall, um, they both had one variable called classroom or classroom ID. So that's the key variable or the common variable that's common to both data sets. So we're going to connect these, or what um, Tableau calls a join. We're going to join these based on that common variable. So to do a join, it's a little bit tricky. Not really, but if you just need to make sure you're clicking on the right stuff. So I'm going to take the capacity table and just drag it to the main part of the screen. And now it looks kind of like a box that says capacity in it. Now to do a join, you need to double click on that box. So it looks kind of like it's like a smaller, thinner box with this blue uh, color at the left edge. So when your capacity box has that little blue spot on the left edge, that means we're ready to proceed. So to join this with the sessions data set, which is what I want to do, and now I go in here and double click on sessions. And it looks like something is broken here because we see that exclamation point, but that's fine. We're going to work through how to get around that in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so I mentioned that Tableau, uh, to do a join, you need to identify a key variable. And we already took a quick peek at the capacity data set and the sessions data set, and they both have a variable called classroom. Well, it's classroom ID in the capacity. Where it says data source here, I think the text says something like create a new join clause. So we have to open up that menu and select the variable that we want to key in on. So classroom ID, and now from the sessions box here, when I hover my mouse over it, I see that I can open up that drop down menu. I'm going to go to classroom. And now I see kind of what we expected in the first place. We see a table with our columns and rows and the data inside. So we'll see if you look closely at each column, not only do we see the data type icons, but the little text shows us what data set they're coming from. So the first two columns here are from the capacity data set, and the last four are from the sessions. And now we're not done yet. We notice that there's this series of Venn diagrams here. So we have different kinds of joins we can do with Tableau. So the default is the inner join. If you hover your mouse over it, it says includes only values which match in both tables. So let's take a look here. You may have noticed this. There's a little bit of text here showing us that there are 6 fields and 12 rows in our data set. So that there's, in other words, there are 6 fields and 12 rows of data that's common between these data sets. Let's see what happens if we choose one of these other join types. If we hover over the left, it says it's going to include all values in the left table and all matches from the right table. Members without matches will show up as nulls. So if I click on the left join, see what happens. Well, we notice that we still have 6 fields, but now we have 13 rows. If we scroll down, let's take a look at what's going on. Okay, so what's going on here is this capacity data set, the one on the left, has one more row. So it has, if we look at the classroom IDs, the classrooms in the capacity data set go A, B, C, D, E. If we look closely, when you could open your Excel sheet to look at this too, it might be easier. But if we look at the classroom names, it goes A, B, C, D. There's no E. So there's no data from the sessions data set that corresponds to classroom ID E. So we're seeing null values because the sessions data set just doesn't have that, right? So that's what the left join does. It's saying we're going to include all of the values in the left table, in this case, capacity, and everything that corresponds in the right. Missing values will show up as null. So that's what we're looking at here. Let's look at the right join. The right join is the opposite of the left. So it's going to include everything in the left table, which in this case is the sessions table, and all the corresponding values from the right. So if we look down, we don't see it. You may have been able to figure that out before we even scrolled down because it says 6 fields, 12 rows in here. So we don't have that row E from the classroom ID because with the right join, where the default is the sessions data set. So everything in the sessions data set, which again does not include the classroom E. So for our purposes, in this example, the inner join and the right join are going to be exactly the same. So let's talk about the full outer. The full outer is when you're looking at, when Tableau is looking at all the data from all the data sets, and any missing values are going to show up as null. So for all our purposes in this example, the full outer is the same as the left, right? So we have 6 fields, 13 rows, but we're missing data for classroom E in the sessions data set. So, so this is sort of something when you're telling your story or when you're creating your own visualization, this is the sort of thing you have to think about. Do you want to include that missing data or not? For this example, I'm not going to. I'm going to just keep the inner join, the default inner join. I could have selected the right again. In this example, it's the same. So I'll close out of that. And now if I wanted to go create some visualizations with this data, I could create sheet 5. And now I can see my dimensions and my rows here. And not only am I seeing the field names, but I'm also seeing what data set they came from, capacity or sessions. And by the way, you may have noticed up on the top of the data panel here, I can toggle back and forth between the Superstore data and the classroom scheduling data. I'm going to go back to the data source. There's another way you can combine data sets in Tableau. It's called a union. So a union is when you have two different data sets that have the same columns and rows, but maybe one is updated or one has additional data and you want to add the additional data to the existing data. So if we look at the capacity pill here, so we started with capacity. That's what we used in the previous example. So we have classrooms that go A through E. That's great. Now let's look at this new room. So in this scenario, we built two new classrooms. So we have a new feet that includes those two new rooms. We're going to call them F and G, and each one feeds 25. So in this example, I just want to show you how you would union these or combine them just by literally just stacking columns on top of each other. So I'm going to start with capacity, and this is actually a lot easier to do than a join. So I'm just going to take capacity, and the new rooms is the one I want to join. So if I hover the new rooms, if I put it right underneath the capacity tab, you can see this box pops up that says union right below the capacity box, and I can drop it in there. And now that little symbol means I've created a union. And if you look at the union, it's literally just the two data sets stacked on top of each other. So we see the classroom ID, the number of seats, and the sheet it came from. And now if you wanted to, you could join these with the sessions data. So if we wanted to, just to refresh your memory, you could double click on that capacity, then double click on sessions, and then select our common variables, classroom ID and classroom. And now we've created a new data set that unioned the capacity in the new rooms and joined it with the sessions. So essentially what we did is we created one data table from 3 individual sheets here. So another way, if that's a little bit, if that's not working out for you the way I showed you, there's another way to do it. You can click on or double click on New Union and just drag the sheets into this dialog box that you want to union. So we'll keep the manual option here because we manually want to union capacity in new rooms. And then okay, and that should do the same thing.
Hey, Joel, I had a quick question. So
Yeah.
to unionize the data sets or create unions, you don't have to have a variable in common like you have to do when you join, right?
Um,
Or you do?
it helps if the columns have the same data, right? So,
Okay.
um, but you don't have to set up that anything like a join clause. It's just kind of stacking the data sets on top of each other. So there should be variables in common, right? Just by
Okay.
the virtue of the way the data is organized. But assuming they're organized in a way where the columns line up, you just add the joins. Because again, if we look at it, not the sessions, but if we look at capacity, it's just these 2 columns, right? Classroom and seats. The new rooms data set, it's the same thing, classroom ID and seats. So we're just essentially just stacking
Got it.
the data. We're going to talk a little bit about how to create dashboards, and that's the last thing we have scheduled. Let's talk about dashboards now. So a dashboard is where you can combine 1 or more sheets to create a visualization that is shareable. Like maybe you want to put it on your website or turn it into a presentation or something like that. So the dashboards are a little bit more flexible in terms of what you can do. So you can, again, you can combine more than 1 sheet onto 1 dashboard. You can add some interactive elements to a dashboard. So in most cases, when people are working with Tableau, the dashboard is the main product that they want to share, right? So you can think of Tableau as like your final presentation product. Um, so to create a dashboard, there's this little icon that looks like a little table. It's just to the right of the new worksheet. So now I have dashboard 1. And now when you're in the dashboard view, you see all of the sheets you've already created in this little sheets panel. I'm going to go ahead and delete sheet 5 because there's nothing there. Okay, so I can drag anything I want from this panel over. So maybe I want the scatter plot in my dashboard. I'm going to remove it. I'm just going to do that again. I just want to, before I get too far ahead of myself, I just wanted to point out something here. You'll see you can add objects into a dashboard as well, but below the objects, I just wanted to show you that there are 2 main ways of adding content to your dashboard. There's this tiled option, which is the default, and there's a floating, which we'll talk a little bit about the differences here, but the tiled, when you have the tiled selected, Tableau is going to automatically like carve out space in the dashboard for the sheet you want to add or the object you want to add. So if we're going to add the scatter plot, that main part of the screen turns gray. I really don't have another option here because there's nothing on my dashboard yet. So there's only really 1 spot to put it. And now you can see here I have the scatter plot plus the legend here. The Tableau put both of those in, and they're independent, right? So I could move the legend around if I wanted to, but I want to add another. I want to maybe add my histogram here. So if I grab the histogram sheet, now this is where you can get a better idea of what the tiled option does. So that grayed out area is where my histogram is going to live. So maybe I want the histogram to be in the top part of my visualization. So I put that, I'm going to drop it here where the top part is grayed out. So there's my histogram. And I could resize this. Maybe I want the histogram to be a little bit bigger so I can hover my mouse in between these. Let's see. Maybe make that a little bigger. I have the same, I just have one legend here because we we had the same color scheme, I think. Is that what we did? Yeah. Technology, office appliance, and furniture. Okay. Um, so one thing you can do with a dashboard is you can also resize it. So this is kind of, it's only taking up about a third of the screen. With the size option here, what I usually like to do is change the range to automatic, and that just spreads out the dashboard over the entire space of my screen. It's just easier to see and easier to work with. But in some cases, you might not want to do that because you might want to consider your audience. So there's with the audience in mind, there's a device preview option. So if you click device preview, you'll see up on the top here, you can select what kind of screen you want to optimize your visualization for. So maybe a lot of your audience uses a phone. Maybe specifically they use an iPhone. So if I go to device preview, device type phone, model, iPhone X. So now this is what the iPhone X users will see when they look at my visualization. So if you want to make sure everything fits, you can grab the edges and make everything fit on one page for an iPhone user. So you can play around with that. You can um, look at different desktop options or laptop options as well. So in this example, some of my visualization is getting cut off. So I might want to see if I can refit it. Maybe I can add a blank vertical space to the bottom. All right, so I wanted to show you that device preview. I'm gonna get out of it just for the moment, just to see the main workspace again. Okay, I'm gonna close out of some of these boxes. Okay, so I'm gonna show you another one. This is too big. Let me see. Give me a minute here. Maybe I'll do fixed size. Okay. So I just went to the fixed and generic desktop. Um, so, okay, I just wanted to show you a couple other things. Maybe I'll take this combo chart out. Okay, I'm going to try the scatter plot and the histogram again. Okay, this time I'm going to put them side by side. Okay, I wanted to show you one other thing you can do with a dashboard. You can create a filter. So we saw in what was it, the combo chart, you can add a filter to a sheet. But with a dashboard, you can use filters too. And one of the neat things about the dashboard is you can um, set up one visualization as a filter for the whole dashboard. So let's see what that looks like. So if maybe I want my histogram to be um, a filter, act as a filter. So with the histogram visualization in here, I see a series of of icons that pop up when I put my mouse on the histogram. I'm going to go to more options, and then I want to click use as filter. So now when I select a category on my histogram, now I only see that category on the scatter plot. So it's kind of an easy way to add interactivity to your dashboard. Um, with the dashboards, I showed you how you could add like horizontal, vertical objects. These are just like if you want to add white space, or maybe you want to put a horizontal bar in between your two graphs. Maybe you want to put maybe you want to move the category um, legend. So we talked a lot about the tiled. Everything we've done so far is tiled. I want to show you what the floating option looks like. So what I usually do is I put my sheets in using the tiled method, and then when I want to move like the legends around, I'll float those. So with floating, and that you can specify that you want a particular box to float, or you can choose this option down here, so everything will float. But I just want this legend to float, so I'm gonna click on that arrow, go to floating, and now I can move it wherever I want it to go. Tableau isn't gonna carve out any space for it. I can put it anywhere. Uh, the potential issue with the floating objects is that when you resize, um, it could move the floating object into a place you don't want it. So the floating objects can potentially cover parts of your visualization that you don't want to. So if I put let's say I put my floating object there, and maybe I want to add a calculated field. In that case, it wasn't that bad, but um, Tableau does tend to move the floating objects around. So just be aware of that, that the floating objects can potentially overlap, and um, Tableau might move them against your will. So if you wanted to float a new sheet, so here's the combo chart sheet. You see that box is shown up anywhere. I can put it wherever I want. So I probably wouldn't really want it there, but I just wanted to demonstrate that method. So if I unfloat it, Tableau is going to tile it over here. That doesn't look great. But in real life, you probably don't want more than like 2 or 3 sheets on one visualization or on one dashboard. So you want to keep them simple. You want to keep them easy to read, easy to interpret. So you just want to make life easier on your audience, so it's easy to interpret what's happening on each dashboard. So you don't want to keep it too cluttered. Um, you can add titles, you can add text, you can add your own image. So if you had an image associated with um, yeah, maybe you have a logo for your furniture store. You could add that image to your dashboard. Um, you could add a text label. I just double clicked where it said text. This is my dashboard. Maybe I want a really big font, and I can move that around. Another thing, if you're wondering, if you make a change to the sheet, it's going to reflect that change on the dashboard. So if I want to change these shapes, we had them as circles. Maybe I want to change them to triangles. When I go back to my dashboard, that change shows up here. And the next object or the product you can create in Tableau is a story, which is kind of like Tableau's version of a PowerPoint presentation. So with A story, you will see you'll be able to add both dashboards or sheets to a story. Yeah, one visualization per worksheet. And when you're in a story, you can only add one thing to a story at a time. So if you do want multiple visualizations on a story point or a slide, you would have to create that in a dashboard first and then add it to your slide. So you can't really do much customization at the story level. It's just a matter of um, putting what you've already created into a slide. So here's story one. Um, my dashboard's kind of cut off. Maybe I want to resize that. So when I reset it to the automatic setting, it still doesn't look great, but it fits a little better on my story. If I want to add another um, slide or what, or as Tableau refers to them, story points, you can add a blank one. So if I drag a new sheet here, maybe I want to put my calculated field there. Maybe I want to add a new story point and put my combo chart there. You can add captions too. You can add text to a story point. So that's pretty much the only customization you can do at the story level is adding captions and text boxes. So really, most of your visuals are created in the sheet level. You can sort of customize them and combine them and add some fancy bells and whistles at the dashboard level. And then the story is where you just combine stuff you've already created. So it does, I think it does take a little bit of practice to figure out how to make everything fit in a dashboard, but it's kind of fun to experiment and to play around with a little bit.